Joining me now is Republican Congressman from Texas' 27th District, Representative Blake Farenthold. Congressman Farenthold, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Good evening, Liz.
Now, I know this is a sober day for all Americans, particularly those in Washington, D.C., particularly members of Congress. I mean, Representative Scalise is your colleague there. Congressman, tell me, have you talked to him?
I have not. He's a friend, not just a colleague. I'm on the whip team with him. He's visited South Texas before. We share the Gulf of Mexico as part of the area that we represent, so a lot of common areas that we're working on. I did text him. There was an announcement with respect to extending the red snapper season, and I texted him and said, Steve, you didn't have to get shot to get us more days for snapper fishing. But hadn't gotten a reply yet.
Right, and I'm sure he appreciates that. Well, everyone's thoughts and prayers are with not only Congressman Scalise and his family, but with our members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. What a traumatic event. Congressman, tell me, what word do you have? I know that Speaker of the House Paul Ryan was the one with updates earlier today. What have you heard about the congressional aides and the Capitol Hill police officers who were also injured in some way during this attack?
Well, everybody's receiving top-notch medical care, and I'm keeping everybody in my prayers and remaining optimistic that everyone will have a full recovery.
Right, as we all are. And then, Congressman, I guess this is the more difficult part of this topic to cover, but the motivation behind the killer here. I mean, his Facebook page, he had a cover photo of Bernie Sanders. He was in a lot of anti-Trump Facebook groups. He posted anti-GOP rants here. In your opinion, Congressman, does this attack appear to be not only premeditated, but also a political motivation behind it?
I certainly hope that isn't the case, but the evidence looks like it's pointing that way. We've reached a level of discourse in this country where we're not talking about issues anymore. Politics is now about personal attacks, and I can't like you if you're not in my party. And that's just not what this country was founded on. Congress was designed for rigorous debate about the issues, not the personal attacks, and certainly not this level of violence.
Right. And so, I mean, I guess the American people, and this is me included, are wondering, is Congress going to change their rhetoric at all? I hate to blame someone's actions on rhetoric because ultimately only the shooter is responsible for the atrocities that he committed against his fellow man. But, I mean, we've had Democrats, and this isn't even elected officials so much as the political populace, you know, calling Republicans Nazis, calling them racist, calling them white supremacists, calling them evil. In a sense, it's unsurprising that it sparks such anger since those names entail that the people then would be very bad people. Is Congress going to make an effort to tone down the rhetoric and get it back to policy and less personal?
Well, in our meeting this morning, both Republicans and Democrats said we need to crank down the rhetoric. But I've got to tell you, it's pretty high. It's fed by social media. It's fed by the media. This morning, right as this was happening, I posted, please pray for Steve Scalise. And not 2 minutes later, somebody came out with a profanity-ridden post blaming it on Republican gun policy.
Right, and I mean, it's not just gun policy that the left's blaming it on. They're blaming it on, you know, I saw a tweet that was equally abhorrent this morning that said, well, maybe if this person was one of the people, one of the 24 million people who would lose their health insurance under the Republicans' plan to repeal Obamacare, maybe this act was just self-defense. And Congressman, I mean, I'm appalled when I see that sort of thing. That's not what our country's about.
Listen, I am too. I sometimes just have to step away from the social media. I start to lose faith in people based on some of the things that they're willing to say behind the anonymity of their computer screens. But you also see it in the media. Listen, you know, I don't, as a radio, television, film major, I understand getting a good story and adding some emotion to the story. But it's like we are throwing gasoline on a fire in some of the things we're seeing on all the networks these days.
Right. It's sensationalism on steroids, and I think it does come at a cost that we should be more cognizant of. Congressman, before we go, one last thing. I mean, the Capitol Hill police officers who were on the scene, they were actually the security detail for Congressman Steve Scalise here. They were the ones who stopped, who neutralized, who shot the killer, or I should say the attacker, before he became a killer here. Senator Rand Paul said if these Capitol Hill police officers hadn't been on the scene, everybody on that baseball field would have died. Everybody.
No, I've talked to several folks that are out there. My kid said, "Dad, this is the first time we're thankful that you aren't more athletic, or you might have been out there." But I've talked to some folks out there, and they agreed that they were sitting ducks. All they had to defend themselves against a weapon were baseball bats.
Right, which is a scary proposition here. I do want to show a picture before we go because I think it demonstrates the unity that is underneath all of our political rhetoric on both sides of the aisle. This picture is congressional Democrats at their baseball practice. As soon as they heard what had happened at the Republicans' practice, they gathered together in this group in prayer for their Republican colleagues. Which brings me, I guess, Congressman, to the question, is the baseball game going to go forward?
It absolutely is. I think this has been going on for almost 100 years. It's something that unites Republicans and Democrats. It raises money for charity. And if you're in the D.C. area or close enough you can get here, you should be at the game tomorrow night to show support and to let people know we're not going to stand for this type of violence. Absolutely. I think it might just be the best baseball game yet. Congressman Farenthold, thank you so much for coming on the show today, sir. It's a pleasure to be with you. Wish it were under happier circumstances. You and me both. All right.